The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This week we've been talking about the Supreme Court decision, which was a 5-4 decision that businesses can use religion as a reason through which they may be exempt from certain parts of laws. Speaking specifically this time, we're talking, of course, of the contraception mandate in the Affordable Care Act and companies like Hobby Lobby. The biggest problem that we presented yesterday was this idea that the decision was made kind of under the auspices of religious freedom, when really it doesn't provide religious freedom to any of the employees of a company like Hobby Lobby. I told you yesterday how they now do not have the freedom to, based on their religion, have access to or not have access to birth control in accordance with the Affordable Care Act. In other words, the employer can take away their employees' religious freedom, which may say, you know what, my religion says it's fine for me to have access to birth control, and I would like to be able to do it as the law stipulates with no copay. That religious freedom is removed. There's another layer that I want to add to this today, and it's been written about by a few different people over the last 24 hours, and it's this idea that there is this kind of privilege that exists because this is really related to Christianity, right? What if this were a Muslim company, a Muslim-run company that wanted to use this decision or wanted to even file a lawsuit to get a decision from the Supreme Court because they wanted to impose their Muslim values on their employees, regardless of the employees' religious views or lack thereof? Would the reaction be the same from Christians? Would the reaction be the same from the Supreme Court? That, you know what, the company, if it is a situation where there are a few people in charge and their views are indistinguishable from those of the, quote, company, that they do get to say whatever it is they want to say, regardless of what the law says, because of their religion. I guarantee, Lewis, the reaction would be different if it were a Muslim company.
Of course. Just like there's white privilege, there's Christian privilege, at least in this country. So I think that, yes, if it were a Muslim company, there would be outrage. Only, I think, a very small number of Christians would support it if it were a Muslim company.
Sharia hysteria would be so widespread that it would make today's day-to-day kind of just basic Islamophobia inherent to our system seem like almost nothing. It would be complete and utter chaos. And what if a black cultural nationalist group, such as the Nation of Islam or the Black Israelites, claimed they have religious freedom to actively discriminate against white people, which, by the way, to be perfectly clear, I don't believe they should have, the same way I don't believe that Hobby Lobby should have the right to circumvent what the federal law is around contraception simply because of their, quote, sincerely held religious belief. And let's go beyond these groups. What about minor religions, the ones that are laughed at by most people who are followers of the major religions? And I'm not saying necessarily the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, but any tiny religion, should it not be afforded the exact same opportunity, the exact same privilege that Hobby Lobby gets? And what if their policy is, like I've said, it's no antibiotics, absolutely no coverage of antibiotics because their religion goes against it, removing their employees' freedom to decide for themselves. It is such a double standard.
It is, and we do have many people in this country, including some judges, scholars, and so-called experts who think the Constitution only protects Christians.
The framers of the Constitution understood this fact, which is why they wanted actual separation of church and state. I wonder what they would have thought about an employer-connected for-profit health insurance system. That's another question. But Gus sent me an email saying, hey, David, I'm wondering one thing about abortion related to this Hobby Lobby case. Isn't abortion a religious issue? Shouldn't religious freedom be an issue when conservatives talk about banning abortion? I am not one to jump all over slippery slopes, but we have to ask, if a religious belief can be used to not provide contraception, what about a religious belief being used to say that we don't want our insurance programs to cover abortions, period? I don't know what would happen in that case.
I'm not sure, but I certainly don't think this entire thing is going to stop here. Do you?
No, I certainly don't think this is the end, although I don't think we have to jump to the most extreme slippery slope scenarios either. This is hilarious. Fox News decided that because of all of the controversy and confusion around the Supreme Court decision with regard to contraception, Hobby Lobby, and the Affordable Care Act, they would bring on an expert to kind of clear up the confusion. In fact, those are the exact words that Fox News anchor Martha McCallum used. The only problem is that they brought on a hate group extremist who filed an amicus brief supporting the right of Christian companies to circumvent the law based on their religious beliefs. That group is the Family Research Council. And Martha McCallum presenting it almost as if it's just an unbiased observer, not someone who, aside from having incredibly bigoted and hateful views as designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center, has no direct interest in the case. They do. Here's Martha McCallum hoping to clear up controversy.
Here to clear up some of the controversy and, misinformation, really, that is out there over the course of this decision. Kathy Ruse is a senior fellow for legal studies with the Family Research Council. Kathy, good morning to you. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
On my way into work, I was listening to a variety of different cable networks, and I was shocked, frankly, at some of what I was hearing, because they were discussing the fact that basically this is an attack on all forms of contraception, that it prevents women from getting the care that they need. And let's take a look at the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote, a little bit of her dissent, because I want to get you to respond to this.
Yeah. You don't need to hear their exact explanation because, as we know, anybody from the anti-gay, bigoted Family Research Council is not going to provide any kind of clarity for us. This is just a sham, Lewis. And I know that the term news is not regulated. Fox News can call itself that in spite of not being actual news. But how does Martha McCallum even get through this without laughing or throwing up all over herself in disgust from the fact that she's saying, let's just clear up the controversy by bringing on someone who filed an amicus brief and is a designated anti-gay hate group, just to clarify, Lewis?
David, she didn't get sick or start laughing because she probably firmly believes in all the nonsense that she was spewing.
Can you imagine if they presented the following story, right? Fox News presents the following story. Black people and people who aren't racist seem to think that black people have the right not to be slaves. On the other hand, white supremacists say black people are inferior genetically and deserve to be treated as property. Here to clear up this controversy is KKK Grand Wizard Cletus Buchanan, right? That's exactly what this is.
Pretty much, yeah. It's hardly fair and balanced, David. I think there should be people on both sides of the discussion if they're going to bring her on, have someone else on who disagrees with her.
At minimum. And of course, we have talked about the false equivalencies that exist on corporate media. That would be, this is Fox News, right? We can't expect to eliminate the false equivalencies. Let's at least have someone on who is ostensibly representing an alternative view, even though we know that the false balance would still be an issue. I've spoken to you about Glenn Greenwald's promise to reveal what seems to be an indication that he's going to reveal the actual names or at least groups of people or in some way identifying the targets of NSA surveillance. This is supposed to be kind of like the grand finale from all of these documents that Greenwald obtained from Edward Snowden, who is now in Russia with a year of asylum there. And we didn't get it. Glenn Greenwald, the latest was that the articles were supposed to be published in the last couple of days. At midnight, a couple of days ago, The Intercept, which is the website where these documents were going to be published, did not publish those documents. The next morning, Glenn Greenwald tweeted, "After 3 months working on our story, USG Today suddenly began making new last-minute claims, which we intend to investigate before publishing." The Sparrow Project tweeted, "The Intercept will not be publishing Glenn Greenwald's much-anticipated NSA piece as expected." Glenn Greenwald was also scheduled to do a Reddit AMA and Ask Me Anything. That was put on hold indefinitely. It's actually not clear what information from the U.S. government may have delayed this. There are some who are speculating it's not so much about information that was presented. It was some kind of threat from the U.S. government. The story is being squashed at the last minute. That's speculation, and we can't say that that speculation is completely out of bounds. We don't have specific evidence to support it, but certainly the motive would be there. Will we ever get these names? Will we ever get these documents, Lewis? Will we ever know why it was that they weren't published ultimately?
I hope that at the very least we'll have some explanation for why they weren't published if they aren't. So I hope this information does reach us, but I'd at least like to know why it doesn't if that's what happens.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time really making what my best guess would be around this. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem crazy to think that the U.S. government doesn't want these documents published. But at the same time, the idea that at the very last minute, the government got involved and did something or provided some information seems odd, because Glenn Greenwald has been teasing this for weeks, if not close to a month. There was plenty of time, right, for the U.S. government to get involved if that's what they wanted to do, whether on the up and up or in more subversive means. I just don't know that this last second explanation makes sense.
Yeah, it's certainly odd, and it's certainly plenty of fodder for conspiracy theories.
What do you think happened? Let me know. Well, tomorrow we can talk about what some of the theories that people have are. Send us email, comment on Facebook, comment on Twitter, YouTube, etc. Let's talk about vaccines. The anti-vaccine movement is quite strong in this country. I still receive emails from anti-vaxxers who tell me that in spite of agreeing with me on most issues, they think I'm completely wrong about vaccines, that vaccines can give you the disease they are meant to prevent, that vaccines can give children autism, that vaccines are part of some vast government conspiracy to control people, etc., etc. And we know that this anti-vaccine sentiment can be directly connected to the recurrence of preventable diseases. We've seen this in California with whooping cough. We've seen it in different parts of the country with measles, etc. We now have a really big study. And I present this to you knowing, Lewis, that those who are against vaccination, this has been studied, seem to be almost completely uninfluenced by actual data surrounding the safety of vaccines. So I present this more for the part of the audience that is interested in the data rather than trying to convince the anti-vaxxers. I know that that seems to not be possible. There's a new study, a very wide-ranging study, which analyzed something like 70 different individual studies on vaccine safety, and it seems that they are safe. I know this won't surprise a lot of people, but it will surprise some. 67 recent scientific studies on childhood vaccinations. The analysis was published yesterday in the journal Pediatrics. It finds, of course, no link between autism and vaccines. That debunks one common myth. It says that while vaccines do have their risks the same way any medical intervention does, that the significant side effects are incredibly rare and are far outweighed by the overall benefit of vaccination. And one of the individuals involved in the study said, fortunately, the adverse effects identified by the authors are rare and in most cases would be expected to resolve completely after the acute event. This contrasts starkly with the natural infections that vaccines are designed to prevent, which may reduce the quality of life through permanent morbidities such as blindness, deafness, developmental delay, epilepsy, paralysis, and may also result in death. The new study is not that innovative. It's not that surprising. We have so many of these studies, but it seems that the anti-vaccine movement is completely immune. Kind of funny to use that term. They seem to be immune from facts and seem to just obsess over sending me links to medical conspiracy websites and completely discredited sources.
Yeah, look, the medical community is in almost total agreement on vaccines. And if you don't defer to the experts on any given matter about that matter, what are you doing? I mean, do you think 5 minutes of internet research is going to make you an expert? You defer to experts on every other in every other instance. Why don't you defer to the experts on this one?
Yeah, and I will get the emails also that say, David, just Google this or that. Google vaccine autism link and look at all the stuff that comes up. Yes, there is a lot of stuff that comes up when you Google that, but I question what basis that has scientifically to influence our positions on this. I think the answer is none.
Yeah, if you Google, lizard men, there's, thousands, if not more, things that come up. But do you actually believe in lizard men?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
I think Lewis is making a brilliant point. Lewis asking all the right questions as usual. Later on today, Patriot Mail. Patriot Mail today, I think, will excite and titillate most of the audience. We will also talk about tax cuts and the economy. We actually have some data to figure out what happens. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because conservatives know that you reduce the abortion rate by keeping birth control away from women while teaching abstinence-only sex education. If that sounds unbiased to you, liberalbias.com is the website for you. Today's new member of the day is James Follis. James, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join James and get all member benefits while supporting an alternative to corporate media by going to davidpakman.com/membership. Remember also you can support the show if you use amazon.com for any shopping at all. Go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the website. Before shopping, Amazon will send us a kickback. It is Wednesday, and it is time for Patriot Mail.
Because it's God's divine plan that every child be born, but an act of patriotic duty to snuff that bastard if he sets a foot near your stuff. Patriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Today's Patriot Mail is very, very relevant when thinking about a recent segment we did on unsubscribed trolls, those individuals who say, well, you said something liberal, I'm now going to unsubscribe. Let's listen to it with that in mind. This is this week's Patriot Mail.
I don't know who you think you are with all this stuff you're taking about. It all sounds like a bunch of socialist garbage to me. You pro-choice, anti-Christian bigot. All you do is push your obnoxious political opinion on viewers. You're discooting.
Yeah, so grammar and spelling aside, this is an opinion show, and I'm always shocked by how many people consistently just talk about how they are not going to watch and they hate the show because we give our opinions which they don't like. This is an opinion show, and you're under no obligation to continue watching this program or listening to this program. It's almost, Lewis, like people just want to keep complaining as opposed to just listening to programs that they think are actually accurate.
Right, unless this is someone who is kept in a room where they're forced to watch our show all the time, in which case it's still not really our fault. You know, someone is forcing you to do that.
Yeah, I still am curious. I've not found out about it yet, but I'm curious whether there are any people that are watching our program under duress or are forced to watch the program. I would love to hear about that if anybody fits that bill, Lewis.
It could be a terrible thing, David, for some people.
The momentum towards marriage equality continues. Back in February, you'll remember that federal district judge John Hayburn, who, by the way, is a George H.W. Bush appointee, issued a ruling that overturned Kentucky's ban on same-sex marriage, specifically to recognize same-sex marriages that take place in a different state, but then are recognized within Kentucky. Judge Hayburn has now gone even further yesterday, expanding that to say that the state's ban on allowing same-sex couples to marry within the state is also unconstitutional, noting that, quote, the ability to marry in one state is arguably much more meaningful than the recognition of a marriage from another state. This is obvious. As several other judges have already done, Hayburn found that, quote, homosexual persons constitute a quasi-suspect class, and thus heightened scrutiny must apply. This means that sexual orientation, the same as gender, the same as race, must be held to a certain standard when they may be the targets of discrimination. I don't know how much more simply I can put this, Lewis. This particular decision is stayed because of an instant appeal. We will eventually see. There's actually going to be a day in August where the Sixth Circuit is going to consider appeals for Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, and Michigan all on the same day. That's going to be a big day. But putting that aside, putting the immediate stay aside for a second, the momentum is clear. And I'm starting to wonder how many of the anti-gay bigots are going to turn very violent because of the momentum, which clearly they don't like, and how many are just going to give up the fight and focus on something else.
Many are going to give up the fight because for them, the fight is making sure that this doesn't happen in your state. And once it does, they might put up a stink for a little while, but ultimately they'll have to give up. And now, I don't think we can make predictions about a timeline anymore. I'm just curious to see what the last few states will be, what the holdouts will be.
Because there are surprises, right? When we hear about Utah and Kentucky, we're hearing about states that we wouldn't have predicted would be happening in 2014. We thought it would be further off, but we're seeing it happen. So at this point, I wouldn't even venture a guess as to what states will be the eventual holdouts.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but of course we can assume that they'd be very, very red states.
I want to talk about one other thing that Judge Hayburn said, because in light of the Hobby Lobby case, it's particularly relevant. He said, in America, even sincere and long-held religious views do not trump the constitutional rights of those who have been outvoted. I don't know if he saw that Hobby Lobby case, because the obvious problem with that statement is I agree 100% with Judge Hayburn that religious views should not trump the rights of people. But the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court decision is an example where a religious hiding behind religion is being accepted as a reason for which the law, the upheld law, the constitutionally upheld law can be circumvented. So I agree with the judge. I just don't think he's right that this isn't happening every single day now in this country.
It's happening, and I'd like to think the Hobby Lobby decision will ultimately be overturned. We'll have to see what happens with other companies that end up making the same types of decisions.
Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of Florida, and she says in court documents that recognizing same-sex marriages performed in other states would disrupt the existing marriage laws of Florida and, quote, impose significant harm. This is nothing we haven't seen before. It's the same blah, blah, blah from the right about protecting families and stable family units and blah, blah, blah. And Pam Bondi made the case in these documents that gay families are simply not stable, so that it's really bad for children to be parented by a gay couple or by a lesbian couple. The only problem with this is that Pam Bondi herself has been divorced twice and is in the middle of another marriage debacle right now. So it's just funny to me because this is really not about stability being associated with a certain type of relationship. We can see stable and unstable heterosexual relationships, gay relationships, lesbian relationships. We can see stable single-parent households. And the problem is that what seems to be a nationwide problem, which is that of more than half of marriages end in divorce, is now being conveniently scapegoated on gay marriage and gay adoption. And Pam Bondi herself is an example of why these arguments make no sense. It seems that for any child, all of her households would have been very, very unstable.
Right. This is another example of deferring to experts. All of the research points in a certain direction, but you have here an attorney general saying something contrary to that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are probably listening.
I'm going to suggest something that might be really crazy. Maybe we can't determine whether a household is good or bad for a child simply based on the sexual orientation of the parents. maybe there are other factors specific to each situation that determine whether it's a good or bad environment for a child. I know this is crazy, Lewis, not casting aspersions on huge groups of people as parents, but just looking at individual situations. But maybe there's something valuable there.
Maybe. Say that to the people who think that if a child doesn't grow up with a mother and a father, that they'll turn into, Bundy or any other serial killer.
Right. Ted Bundy, not Pam Bondi. We want to make sure that to make that distinction.
Yeah. That could have been confusing. Sorry about that.
I don't know that there's that much else to say about it. If you still think that simply the sexual orientation of the parents determines whether it's a good or bad environment for a child, there's nothing I can say that's going to convince you. But at least this maybe will serve as some data for those who understand our point of view. That sometimes what's that phrase, Lewis? This is something that I'm not that good at in English. Those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Is that the way it goes?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, well, that should apply to this situation. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Next, tax cuts. Good for the economy or bad for the economy? We have data from Kansas, and I will present that data to you next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, so Republicans insist, as most of our audience knows, that cutting taxes, particularly for rich people and corporations, is really, really good for the economy. This, of course, is completely counter to basic economics that I learned when I was 16 years old in high school, but that's okay. It's still a catalyst for getting a whole bunch of Republican voters to support candidates. We now have some data. Governor Sam Brownback of Kansas actually wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last month to talk about how well his economic program has been doing, especially after income tax cut after income tax cut, amounting total to the largest in the state's history. He said, "We supported small business by taking away all income taxes on small business, allowing them to reinvest in their businesses, creating jobs and growth. By giving the companies more money to reinvest in their businesses, we enabled them to hire more people and invest in needed equipment." Okay, but before we get to actually how this went, this is just ridiculous. We know from basic economics that actually really low taxes are a disincentive to invest in your business. For people who may not know, business expenses, payroll, equipment are deductible, meaning if your business makes $100,000 and you spend $20,000 on equipment and employees, you pay taxes on $80,000. In other words, you deduct those expenses. If you were to spend $40,000, you would only pay taxes on $60,000 of your revenue. If taxes are really high, you have more of an incentive to invest in your business to reduce the amount of taxable income. If taxes are really low, there is less incentive to invest in your business because you can keep the money as earnings with less going to taxes. I don't know how many times I have to explain this, Lewis. It seems that Republican politicians just don't understand it.
If they do understand it, they don't care. It's about making sure that the rich get richer. That's the entire mission here.
Tax cuts for the rich are very useful at making rich people richer. Lewis is absolutely right. Okay, so let's get past the obvious misunderstanding of basic economics. How did it work, right? How did these tax cuts work in Kansas? Not well. The tax cuts did not create jobs. Job growth in Kansas has actually lagged behind the U.S. average, especially in the years after these tax cuts. Earlier this year, Neeraj Choksi from the Center on Budget Policy Priorities did a study of the Kansas tax cuts, and the authors concluded that Kansas is a cautionary tale, not a model. Other states are recovering from the recent recession and turning towards the future. Kansas, instead, with its huge tax cuts, has been left with public schools and other services stuck in a recession, underfunded, and further declining. Every single month, we have more findings that validate the notion that tax cuts for the rich and businesses do not stimulate the economy, but rather providing stimulus, either via tax cuts or government spending to lower and middle classes, actually is a very good way of stimulating the economy. Now, as Professor Richard Wolff told us on the program, we're talking about two strategies within a fundamentally unfair and unequal system, okay? So I want to remind the audience of that. This is not to say that our system is great, we just need demand-side stimulus. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that within a system that we recognize to be unequal and necessary of significant reform, we are going to do better in the short and medium term, not by giving tax cuts to the rich, but rather by stimulating the lower and middle class. And it could be via tax cuts. They already have several tax incentives. It could be via government spending. I don't know. I mean, it's just very depressing that just simple economics that, by the way, my right-wing high school economics professor taught me, that basic understanding seems to be completely missing from just about every conversation around tax cuts.
Right. And as with most economic things, we have models of what works and what doesn't work in other countries all over the world. And I think as soon as you approach something that the right would call socialist, it's just evil. And instead, it's better to suffer and have a terrible economy, I guess.
And the only example is not from Kansas, right? We know that when we look at what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin, again, tax cuts and gutting the rights of labor unions to bargain collectively, gutting the rights of teachers, their economy is falling apart. He was supposed to create 250,000 jobs in some period of time. Who even knows? Anyway, it doesn't even matter what period of time it is because he's lost jobs. Jobs have been lost. It's not, well, he created 225 instead of 250, or he created one instead of 250,000. No, he lost jobs. And this voodoo supply-side economic nonsense seems to be debunked time and time again. Okay, let's talk about paid family leave. Of the 188 countries in the world, only 3 have no paid family leave. The United States is one of those 3, along with Papua New Guinea and Oman, according to a new report from the International Labor Organization. The other 185 governments have adopted laws authorizing mothers, and in 78 countries, even fathers, to take time off and still receive paychecks while caring for newborns or other relatives. The ILO has 3 standards for family leave. It should be at least 14 weeks, pay should be at least 2/3 of regular earnings, and the funding should come from social insurance or public funds rather from employers' pockets. This is key, ladies and gentlemen. This is not about hurting businesses by forcing them to pay for family leave. We are talking about social insurance here, okay? This is not about hurting businesses. In fact, when we actually look at the effect of paid family leave on businesses and on employees, lo and behold, Lewis, that old adage of happy employees are good employees seems to hold true. Less turnover, more productivity upon their return. Every reason, as any clear and logically thinking individual would know, paid family leave is a good thing for businesses, and it is something that can easily be paid for socially. I know, it sounds like Marxism. It sounds like that evil Indonesian Obama is going to be doing crazy Marxist communist stuff. But no, 185 countries have already adopted this. Does the U.S. take pride in being one of 3 countries, along with Oman and Papua New Guinea, that hasn't done this? What does this say about our country that we can't seem to get this together?
You could say the same thing about the death penalty, and there certainly are people who take pride in that. So I'm sure there are plenty of people who take pride. You know, I don't know if it's a matter of pride. I'm sure there's just a lot of business owners who are glad that they don't have to deal with this.
Right. And again, the problem is that when we actually, this is really interesting. Sharon Lerner from Demos researched this. She researched businesses with paid family leave in California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island because they actually provide cash benefits to workers who are in a situation with a newborn. And the employers are saying that it has actually worked out really well. It is true that happy employees are better employees. Most of those businesses have said that it has been a positive thing. Then some said it has been neutral, and then just very few have said it has been a negative thing. So the U.S. just has to get with it here. We're way behind on, as Lewis mentioned, the death penalty. We're way behind on providing health care to everybody. And we don't even have paid family leave. We need some changes here. And to be honest, we're definitely not going to get it from Republicans, and we're probably not going to get it from plutocratic Democrats who seem to be the only ones that can get elected nationally.
Right. The businesses seem to be in control, of course. But by that, I mean the giant ones, David, and it's just dominating.
If you have a Twitter account or Facebook account, please take 15 seconds to donate either a retweet or Facebook share to us through Donate Your Account. This is really easy. About 400 of our viewers are doing this now. Go to donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. This is a huge boost to us. It lets us leverage our social media presence, and it costs nothing. So please check that out. Donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The Catholic Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota is having a little bit of a problem, which is that Archbishop John Nienstedt, who is well known for his anti-gay statements and his statements against marriage equality, same-sex marriage, etc., is now being accused of so-called same-sex misconduct. The Catholic leader is under investigation by a law firm that has been hired by the Archdiocese based on, quote, multiple allegations that Nienstedt had relations with multiple men, including priests and seminarians. He authorized the investigation himself, but denies that the allegations are true. The Archdiocese's former canon lawyer, Jennifer Haselberger, said, I believe that the investigators have received about 10 sworn statements alleging sexual impropriety on the part of the Archbishop dating from his time as a priest in the Archdiocese in Detroit, as Bishop of New Ulm, and while coadjutor and Archbishop of St. Paul and Minneapolis. What's more, he also stands accused of retaliating against those who refused his advances and otherwise questioned his conduct. This is the key part. Listen to what Nienstedt himself said. I have never engaged in sexual misconduct and certainly have not made any sexual advances towards anyone. The allegations do not involve minors or lay members of the faithful, and they do not implicate any kind of illegal or criminal behavior. This is so key because he's not denying that he's a gay guy, and he has made a career out of being a Catholic anti-gay activist. Who knows how many people he's told need to not be gay or they will go to hell. And he himself, according to 10 sworn statements, while he denies that he did anything inappropriate, is not denying that he is just a gay man who is involved in gay relationships. This is so damaging. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And the idea that you can be a person of God when you tell a mother to reject her gay son while you're having sex with men and allegedly punishing the ones who refuse to have sex with you, how can you call yourself a person of God, a man of God?
I think it's clear, David. I think it's all a sham. It's all a joke. I mean, none of it is real. And the ones who do think it's real, I feel bad for them because they're just misled. What else can I say about it?
There's another so-called family values Republican who has a really weird sexual fetish, one that I've never heard of. Maybe Lewis has, I don't know. We're talking about 24-year-old Jordan Haskins from Saginaw, Michigan, who is running for Michigan state legislature. And he is asking voters to look past not only his criminal record, but also his bizarre sexual fetish. He is on parole as he campaigns for the 95th District House seat. He's going to be going up against the Democratic primary winner in the November election if he is able to win the Republican primary. His criminal history includes jail time in 2 different states, including Michigan, and his earliest offenses were related to vehicle break-ins. And he says that those are from 15 years old when I was just a lonely, angry kid. However, there is more. Between April of 2010 and January of 2011, and this is when it gets really weird, he was arrested 4 times on charges related to trespassing and vehicle break-ins. Now, there's kind of an obvious question there, which is, so many vehicle break-ins, is he stealing cars? Is he trying to steal and sell the cars? Why breaking into so many cars? And the answer, Lewis, is insane. His break-ins to cars were often tied to the sexual fetish called cranking. Cranking is when you break into vehicles, you disconnect the ignition wires and restart the engine while masturbating. This is what he was doing according to police reports. It is also confirmed by an unrelated report from the Independent, which talks about this fetish, where the fetish is where, according to a psychologist, this is just so insane, I'm really struggling through this, the vroom of the engine reminds men of their own libidos being revved up by an attractive woman, presumably, if it is a heterosexual individual. Lewis, what do you think of this? Cranking. Have you ever even heard of this? Masturbating while hot wiring cars?
I've never heard of it. It is quite strange, but I guess of all the fetishes and people who pursue odd fetishes, at least he's not harming anyone.
Right. Well, I'm
all
reminded, Lewis, of a different car-related weird sexual escapade from last year. We covered it on the show, and it's the vice mayor of Mount Carmel, Tennessee, William Blakely. He was accused of driving 90 miles an hour while masturbating out the window with his pants down. That is a bizarre sexual fetish that has very dangerous connotations.
Right. 90 miles per hour. People are seeing his junk, and he's likely to crash and kill someone or himself. This, not as harmful. I mean, he's still damaging cars, breaking into cars. That's bad. But at least it's not violent, and no one is being physically harmed.
Well, some people said that the way in which he was masturbating was quite feverish and violent, but that's a different type of violence, I think, Lewis. So let's go to the ultimate question. Is it fair, as a voter, to hold him responsible for vehicle hotwire masturbation and not vote for him? Is that a valid reason not to vote for someone if their political platform is in line with your beliefs?
Oh, wow. I don't think I could do it, David. I don't think I could vote for a person who thinks that despite the public knowledge of all this stuff, they still think they have a chance, because clearly that's someone who's delusional and not grounded in reality.
Let's wait to see the election results before we say that there's absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
So there it is. Jordan Haskins cranking, masturbating while hot wiring vehicles. All right, there it is. Voicemails. Our voicemail number is 219-2DavidP. Call us anytime. A lot of reaction to yesterday's show. Here's one voicemail.
Hey, David. It's Derek here. So about the Rick Santorum thing, sorry. I really don't understand what's with this constitutional fetishism, because, yes, our founders said that only certain people could vote, but there's this thing called progress, and, those people back then, 200 years ago or more, were not infallible. They don't know everything. They didn't know everything, and we need to update to modern times, and that's what we've been doing by adding all these, Civil Rights Act and all this other stuff.
Yeah, how dare you question whether the people who created the original founding documents of this country hundreds of years ago might not have been able to foresee how modern society would develop and suggest that anything should be changed. Lewis, that's a huge insult to the founders. Obviously, they were not regular old people who might make mistakes or not be able to completely accurately predict the future. They were infallible deities that whose words need to be worshipped as a religious text.
And they are. Yeah, it's sad that people think that.
All right, one more voicemail. Let's listen to this.
Good morning there, Dave and Luce. Great show, as always. This is John from Highbridge. Commenting on your NRA spokesman talking about the fact that they refer to the shooting crimes as the shooter, and guns taking all the rap over cars and knives. But he's not including the point that cars and knives have a lot of other utility. Guns, hunting and sport shooting, whatever, but They're made to kill people.
Absolutely. We've talked about this before. Any comparison between restrictions on gun ownership and restrictions on knife or, kitchen knife or car ownership are ridiculous, and they should be ignored for what they are, since we are talking about items, products, devices that are not primarily designed to shoot people. And that needs to be repeated many, many, many times. On today's bonus show, cell phone service in the New York City subways, a strange child endangerment case, as well as a very interesting discovery in Japan. Lewis will bring us those stories and more on today's bonus show. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. Why miss the bonus show? If you like this show, there's more of it on the bonus show. Talk to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.